What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Crafters. I'm David Wilson, and today we're back with another instance of System Crafters Live, our Friday live stream, where we talk about all types of interesting topics. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the note-taking strategy called Zettelkasten. Let's see if I get that right today. I'm going to be saying it a bunch of times, so if I say it wrong, just please feel free to correct me, as people have already been doing in many cases. Now, and one thing that we're doing differently today than previous streams is I'm actually trying to stream this on multiple services at the same time. So we're going to see if this actually works correctly. In fact, I'm going to go check if it's working. Let me actually switch to the first slide. Whoops, that's the wrong slide. All right, let's see here. We'll see if the channel is live on Twitch. It should be live on... Yeah, it looks like we are live on Twitch, and it should be live on Twitter as well, which is going to be kind of interesting to see how that goes. There's 2 viewers on Twitch. And then Twitter, let's see. Twitch is slightly ahead, YouTube is slightly behind. Interesting, good to know. Check my own Twitter here and see what's going on. Sorry for the delay here, folks. Just making sure this actually is going to work today. Webcam is smoother than usual. Yeah, we'll see how that goes as time goes on here. Let me check here real quick. So let's see. As you can see, I have a little bit of a different chat view today. This is something that's actually coming from this Restream service that I'm using, where the chats from all 3 platforms are being aggregated together, which is kind of interesting. Okay, cool. I do see that there's a live stream happening on Twitter as well. Great. All right, let's see. Let me say hello to some folks who are here today. Daigo, Fab, Novaliri, Mark, Drishal, Mark, another Mark, Johnny Walker, Alan, Garjola, Arya, Ashraz, Dustin, Pavel. Thanks so much for being here, folks. I really appreciate it. So yeah, so as I mentioned briefly before, I actually have created a Twitch channel. Hi, Bulbous Bullfrog. And the idea there is that, you know, streaming on YouTube is great because for streams like this on Fridays where we kind of want to have a recording of what's been covered because there might be interesting things for people to go back and look at. It's nice to have those recordings on YouTube because that's where all the content is. But the thing about YouTube streaming is that YouTube's live interface is not very discoverable. It's not easy for people who don't know about the channel to find the stream. So I'm going to try streaming a little bit on Twitch at the same time, or maybe even do some secondary streams on Twitch only to see how that goes, because it's more of a streaming first platform and it has better tools for discoverability, so that if someone's just cruising around on Twitch looking for technology streams, they might actually find this one and stop by. So we'll give that a shot. As we talked about in the stream last Friday, I've been thinking about different ways to make the streams more interesting, and we talked about maybe some other secondary streams that I could do that would be interesting to see, like maybe preparation streams for content for videos and things like that. So I might try to do a little bit of that whenever I have time. And time is short, but I like streaming, so I would like to do a little bit more of it, maybe in a more traditional sense. Let's see. Slalom Skater, greetings from Switzerland. Your pronunciation was okay. Great. Hi, Rajath, Ani1, Willem, Enos, I don't know if that's the way you pronounce your name, Jason, Thomas, Horatio, Rodney. I don't know if I said hello to Rodney earlier. Also, one other thing that's new this week is that you can also, I added a new sponsorship platform. So currently people sponsor me on both GitHub sponsors and on Patreon, but I had recommendations from people like Garjola here to open up a LibrePay account, because LibrePay is a little bit different than the other sponsorship platforms in that it, what does this mean? Is Twitch gone? Is that what happened? Anyway, LibrePay is obviously not run by a company that has, proprietary software or, wants to track data and things like that. So if you want to sponsor the channel, but you want to do it in a way that's a little more privacy friendly and more sort of free software friendly, you can go and check out the LibrePay site for system crafters. And a couple people have already started sponsoring there, which is awesome. Really appreciate that. But if you're interested in sponsoring and you don't really care too much about, sponsorship tiers or even me knowing who's sponsoring, because apparently it's all anonymous. If you sponsor someone there, the person receiving the sponsorship doesn't know who it is. So kind of, it's not so great for me, because I like to know who's sponsoring just so that I can be, appropriately, appreciative to the person for that. But if you don't really care about that, then you should definitely think about sponsoring there. Let's see. What are we saying here? Nova says, I've been following your Emacs from Scratch videos. Are really helpful. Thank you. That's great. Ashra says that System Crafter is going to be in store. You mean like, System Crafter's mug. I'm working on that right now. So I'm setting up a Shopify thing, Shopify page, site, whatever. And I'm hooking that up to a printing service that seems really good. And that'll allow me to do all kinds of things like t-shirts, mugs, I think stickers, other types of, merchandise that might be cool. So I'm working through getting some basic things set up. I want to do some test prints first before I start providing these things for people to purchase, because I want to make sure the quality is good. So it may take me another week, depending on how long these test prints take to get here for me to, iterate. But I'm definitely going to have that stuff up soon, because I'm really excited. I mean, I want to have a System Crafter shirt and coffee cup. I mean, I have one, but I think it could be better. So we're going to see how that goes. Garjola says, LibrePay is a non-profit. Yes, it is a non-profit. Nova says, I've been learning Emacs so I can set up my planner for college. Well, this today's discussion might be useful for you then. Tomas says, hey, new appearance. Cool. Yeah, just the chat is new. It's kind of weird, because it's telling me that Twitch is not online anymore, but I don't think that's the case. Somebody was watching on Twitch just a moment ago. Okay, yeah, Twitch is online. Great, thanks so much for letting me know. All right, so let's see. Ashra says, System Crafters, we craft our systems to craft your system. Yeah, well, it takes a while to craft the systems that are necessary for facilitating the system crafting, I'll tell you what. But it's all worthwhile. I'm having a lot of fun. Let's see. Dustin says, I found you as I love modal editing and wanted a better Rome replacement. I bet more Org Rome videos will give you more subscribers. I think your Org Rome video now has your most views. Yeah, Org Rome is a very popular topic. And it definitely has the most views I've ever received in a single week. It's, I think it got maybe 12,000 views in a single week, which is quite a lot for me. Usually never that long. Hi, Joseph. Joseph, nice to see you here on time. You're fine. Even if you're late, you're still on time. Garjola says, are Twitch videos recorded and available after the stream? Yeah, so on Twitch, they would be recorded. And I'm not actually recording the live stream videos to my machine right now because it takes extra CPU, but once I switch back to my other streaming machine, I will be doing that, so I could still try to upload those to YouTube if people were interested in seeing them. It's going to be a little bit of a experimental phase to figure out what the right way to do multi-platform streaming and whether people actually want to see the content recorded on YouTube. Ina says, I share with all of my friends. Thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate that. Christian says, is it possible to integrate Org Rome in the org mode agendas? Yes, it absolutely is. And I'll show you how to do that in another video. It's actually easier than you might think. Hey, Drashal, watching from 2 places. That's great. All right, so another thing I wanted to bring up, just yesterday, I think the call for presentations for Emacs Conf 2021 just went live. And what I want to see is many of you here making proposals for presentations to Emacs Conf. Now, I know that many of you may feel like nervous to do a presentation, but if you go look at the Emacs Conf presentations from last year, you can find them online. The recordings are even on YouTube. It's a very relaxed event, and I think that it's a really good opportunity for you to share something that you find interesting about Emacs. So if you have any interest at all in making a presentation for the Emacs Conf this year, go check out their page at emacsconf.org. Let's see. I have not yet sent a proposal because I don't yet know what I want to talk about, but I am going to send a proposal as soon as I think of something. So probably this weekend I'll send a proposal there, but I highly recommend participating in this if you have anything you're interested in talking about, because the more people who present at this conference, the better the conference will be. And it's really good to have diverse perspectives from people from different walks of life, especially people who aren't programmers. So if you're like a writer, or you're a university professor, or even a university student, or any type of person using Emacs for any purpose, you should definitely consider giving a talk about your own experience with it, or something that you find useful, or maybe some Emacs Lisp code that you've written that you think is useful. You can do presentations on just about anything. So they also recommend different types of talks. So if you don't want to do a full 40-minute talk, you can do a 10-minute talk, and that's really easy. Like me being a person who regularly makes videos for an hour, it's talking for 10 minutes is not so hard, and you can come up with content for 10 minutes pretty easily. Now the question is, can you actually come up with complete content in 10 minutes? That's where things get more interesting. But definitely give this a shot if you're interested in doing a conference presentation, because this is a virtual conference. It's all online. You're basically just streaming your camera and your screen to the conference, so you don't have to go in person or risk coronavirus or anything like that. So I highly recommend that. Let's see. Hi, Star7 and Valentino. Did I get back the other machine? Yes, I did receive my streaming machine back yesterday. For those of you who may not remember or didn't hear about what happened, maybe about 3 months ago, I think it was in May, I made the mistake of changing a very innocent seeming BIOS setting in my laptop that I previously used for recording and streaming, and it bricked my motherboard. So I had to send it back to Lenovo, and they finally just sent it back yesterday. It took forever for them to get the parts required. I think that the supply chain issues due to COVID have slowed things down quite a lot on that front, but I got the laptop back. I haven't got it set up completely yet because I had to reinstall Geeks, but it will be back next week, I think. Hey, Vladislav. So the last thing I want to say is that some good news coming on the Emacs 28 front. There was a mail on the Emacs Devel mailing list last week saying that Emacs 28 is heading towards stabilization. And the way this is described is that release schedule-ish. Basically what it's saying in this email, what Lars is saying, is that in September, the tentative plan is that in September they're going to branch off the stable branch for 28 from the main branch of Emacs development so that they can start doing stabilization. So that doesn't mean that Emacs 28 will be available in September. It just means that the stabilization process will start, and it really depends on how many bugs are found and how much documentation work and everything is needed before the final stable release can be done later. It's possible that it could be later in this year, or it could be the beginning of next year. It really just depends on how that goes. But if you are interested in seeing Emacs 28 be released as a stable version sometime this year, then maybe whenever the stabilization branch gets created, definitely go try out Emacs 28 if you haven't yet, and report any issues you find so that the developers have a chance to fix it before they do the stable release, whenever that ends up happening. But just a little tidbit of information in case you're excited about Emacs 28 and the inclusion of the new native comp functionality, which won't be on by default, like I mentioned before. It will be a compiler flag, but I kind of imagine that a lot of packagers and Linux distributions are going to turn it on because it's pretty stable and provides a lot of value. So it'll be a good thing to see Emacs 28 come out finally. A lot of other cool things being added to 28 as well. So we'll see a lot of cool stuff as that comes out. Pavel says Emacs 28 is going to stabilization, but the DRED variable I want is available only in 28.1. So stabilization means 28.1. So the way that Emacs version numbers work is that the development version for Emacs is usually like the major version .0, and then whenever the stable version actually gets released, it becomes .1. So that's how you can tell that the DRED variable will be in that stable release. Let's see. What's new in Emacs 28.1? Well, there's a lot of things, so I would recommend checking out the Emacs Git news. Let's see if I can actually find that file by this search. News at master. Yeah, that's probably good enough. I mean, this is on GitHub. This is not the official repository, but this is a mirror that stays up to date. So this file will tell you what all of the news is for the 28, whatever will eventually go into the 28.1 release. What does this say? Okay. And that's it for updates for today. So today's topic, what I wanted to talk about is how you can apply Zettelkasten faithfully in Emacs with org roam, or whether you can do it. This is a note-taking strategy that is probably unlike what you're used to. So we have to talk a little bit about what it is, and then sort of talk about how we can map that to Emacs and to org roam. Garzola says, but system crafters know how to build Emacs from source. I build from master weekly and it's completely fine for everyday work. Yeah, well, if you're using Geeks, or if you're using Arch Linux or Arch Linux, however you want to pronounce that, you can definitely compile that from source anytime you like. And it's very easy to compile it from source anyway. So if you really want to see what the new stuff in Emacs is going to be, it's quite easy to compile Emacs from source yourself if you just install the dependencies on your preferred Linux distribution or Mac OS or even Windows. It's doable. So you can try it yourself if you want to. Avocadora says, do you know any more details on Emacs Treesitter? I have not been following the developments there. I know there's been some debate about maybe including it in Emacs. I've seen some email threads in Emacs Devel about it, but I don't really know what's going to happen with that. There's probably going to be some issues with the components needed for Treesitter, because it requires some native components to be built, and some of them are actually in Rust. So that complicates the build matrix for producing Emacs binaries quite a lot. I don't know how easy it would be to integrate Treesitter into Emacs. I feel that Treesitter as an Emacs package is perfectly fine to do, and that's probably the way it should stay, because it is a little bit of a it's harder to set up, I would say. Garjola is using Debian, but still is able to compile Emacs 28 just fine. Okay, so we're going to discuss the concept of Zettelkasten, who it's for, and how it might be applied in Emacs. And I'll say up front that this is not meant to be a tutorial. Malguro says Arch team here. Hi, nice to see you. That's great. This is not meant to be a tutorial. So I am learning about this sort of as we go. I've actually been reading a book about this, which I'll talk about in a second. And what I'm going to tell you today is my understanding of what I've read so far, and also sort of my own insights into how I've been using org roam and how I think I could use it differently for the purpose of applying this approach. So I'm going to give an overview of the approach, but really this is meant to be a discussion. So if you know some things about Zettelkasten, or you have some insights to share at any point, please feel free to speak up in the chat so that we can discuss it, because this is really just meant to be a discussion stream. Let's see. So we're going to talk about a few different things. First of all, who is this method for? Who does it apply to? We're also going to talk about how you could, or we're not going to go into very big detail about how you could do it in Emacs, but we're going to say basically how can you do it in Emacs? Can you apply it correctly or follow the rules to the letter in Emacs? Also, do you really need to follow it faithfully? Like, is this something that is an approach that you need to use, or is this something maybe you can take some ideas from and then apply it to yourself? And then what are your tricks? So if you've been implementing Zettelkasten in your Emacs configuration or in your org workflow, how have you been applying it? So we'll talk about all of these things as we go, but like I said, please feel free to interject at any time if you have anything that you want to contribute to the conversation, because like I said, this is a discussion stream. All right. So those of you who are wondering, yes, I have been reading the book How to Take Smart Notes by Sönke Ahrens. I think that's the way to pronounce that name. If you haven't heard of this book, it's basically a book that discusses the technique of Zettelkasten and how to implement it. And I've got a link here to Amazon for the Kindle version. This is actually an affiliate link. If you want to support the channel, you can use this link to buy that book, and I'll get like probably 10 cents or something. I don't really know how much it would be, but this is a good book. I've read probably about half of it by this point, and I've seen enough of the details of the implementation to understand the sort of the high level overview and how it might be applied. So like I said, I'm not an expert in this topic, but I know some things from reading, and we'll discuss we'll discuss things as we go. Garjola says that Sönke is pronounced as Zettelkasten. So yeah, I think that's the right way. So what this book basically talks about is that there's been a recurring note-taking approach used in some form by writers and researchers since the 1500s. So a long, long time people have been doing something like this, where ideas and notes are stored on individual pieces of paper or in a book or note cards and organized in a way that enables the author to find them easily. So the idea is that anybody who has to do some kind of research or knowledge work where you have to think about a lot of ideas and synthesize information, usually you're going to have some way to capture that information so that you can kind of keep track of it, because you can't hold everything in your head at the same time. So you need to have a trustworthy system where you can keep information, refer to it easily, and also maybe gain some insights from all the information you have there. Because really the purpose of doing this is not just to take information from a book and write it down. It's actually to take information from places, plus the thoughts that you have, the ideas that you have, mix them all together to create something new, to synthesize new ideas and information. Zettelkasten, also known as the slipbox method, is an approach developed by a sociologist named Niklas Luhmann, who used it to write over 70 books and 400 research papers in his lifetime, which sounds pretty insane if you think about it. I mean, most people don't write more than maybe 5 books in their lifetime, and I would say the vast majority of people write 0 books in their lifetime. But Niklas was able to write many, many books because of this method that he developed. So this is sort of a specialization of this idea of taking small notes and then having some way to organize them so that you get value out of this information that you're amassing over time. And this approach is very kind of ingenious in some ways, because it gives you the ability to take a lot of the ideas that you have and present them to yourself in a way that gives you new insights based on how you've organized it. So this is something that a lot of people have been interested in I guess with maybe the last year or two. It's kind of come up a lot. I think there's been people who've been interested in interested in it longer than that, but there was an application that got released excuse me, I don't know how long ago it was, but it's called Roam. It's not Org Roam, it's Roam. And the program basically allows you to implement the slipbox or Zettelkasten method in software. And from that's how Org Roam was sort of inspired through this book, How to Take Smart Notes, and the Roam program by Roam Research. Org Roam was sort of created as a free open source version in Emacs of that same idea. Let me actually jump through this here. Let's see, I see some things coming through. Garjola says Emacs is old, from the 1500s. Yeah, it really is old. Nova says, I started to take digital notes because I ended up using so much paper. Yeah, I think doing a paper version of this approach, which is what the original creator Niklas did, I think it would be very hard to manage. John says, I live in the Bielefeld, and about 5 years ago, the local modern art gallery had an exhibition of the original Zettelkasten. That sounds really cool. It'd be awesome to see it. Let's see. Let's see. Though his handwriting was awful, yeah. Luhmann was an obsessed workaholic as part of his productivity. Yeah, I mean, I would say many people who get into this kind of thing become obsessed with the work, because, you know, it's cool to think about, you know, ideas and create your own ideas. Any comment about how to pronounce Luhmann? Well, I've been looking up these names online to make sure that I'm pronouncing them right, so hopefully I'm pronouncing them at least mostly correctly. Star7 says, I'm planning to use Zettelkasten to document software I work on Office so I can visualize and provide help to new people quickly. Yeah, making an internal knowledge base, or at least one that you can use to help people, would be great. All right. So Lumen is the best approximation for pronunciation. Great. Okay, so the system is, excuse me, having trouble with my tongue today, haven't slept enough, obviously. The system is designed to facilitate not only memory and reference, but the development of insight and ideas over time. So it's not really a useful system unless it provides some value to you other than just being a reference source. The goal being that a written work can be constructed, a written work like a book or blog post, article, research paper, can be constructed directly from the material that's been captured in the Slipbox after the author has been inspired to write on a particular topic. And one of the things that you see in the book, How to Take Smart Notes, is that a common misconception people have about writing, especially like students in university who have to write research papers or thesis, or anyone who has to write a book, is that you have to start from scratch. Like you have to start thinking, okay, what's my topic? What do I want to write about? And the reality is that you can't just magically create a topic unless you have some information already. So part of the process of writing something is actually doing the research in advance, and then sort of coming up with your own conclusions about what you're reading and your own synthesis of ideas, especially if you can take ideas from multiple domains and put them together. And then you have your topic. But the benefit of something like Zettelkasten is that if you follow the approach that is described, then you've already written a lot of the pieces of the material you need, because the idea is you're writing individual notes that are about specific topics, specific ideas even, and you are supposed to write them in a way that is, usable information, that has the context necessary to be used. So instead of starting from zero to write a book, you actually have this wealth of information you've built up through your own research in your Slipbox, and then you can use that information directly to then start writing a book from that existing material. All right, so let's see. So there's a couple of good resources on this aside from the book that I mentioned before. There's a website called Zettelkasten.de, which talks about this approach, but also talks about how to apply it to software. They have their own program for this. And there's also, I think they did a post recently about Org-Rome version 2, talking about how that is used, or not really specifically how to use it, but just the fact, bringing it up as an implementation of how to do this. And there's also a translation of the paper Communicating with Slipboxes, which was written by Lumen, that you could read if you want to see the original thoughts about this from the person who created it, which can be pretty interesting to look at. I have read a little bit of it. Let's see. Garjola says, if you have a Zettelkasten writing a paper or a report or a book, it's bottom up and not top down. A bit like brainstorming before planning, but the brainstorming is already done. Yes, exactly. The idea is that you're not going from a top-down view of writing something, like coming up with an outline and then writing it. You're actually sort of letting the things that you've written in your Zettelkasten or your Slipbox inspire you and give you the structure already, because the structure sort of presents itself to you through the way the system works. Sasha says the man is a bit different from English. It's an open A like Hans. Luhmann. That's right. You're right. Thank you. Mark Owen says, very interesting book. I've created some notes in Org-Rome, but haven't stuck with it enough to create enough notes. I've only got a couple links so far, so my graph is very boring. Yeah, mine is not great either, to be honest. Glenn says, I know there's also orgbrain.el, but I've not used it enough to compare it. Yeah, me either. I've also heard of that one, and I need to take a look at it. I might actually take a look at that as we get further into the series that I started talking about Org-Rome. All right, so let's move on to who this method is for. So far we've been talking about writing research papers, writing books, etc. So it's clear that this is a very specific, this approach is tailored to a specific demographic, and that's the people who will, people who will derive the most value from this approach are those who need to create new ideas and content out of their personal research. So that would be like writers and bloggers, or researchers, whether they're scientists working in a research lab, or maybe university professors who are writing research papers, documentarians, anybody who's making documentaries, either film or writing autobiographies, things like that. And even people like me, YouTubers, who not only have to capture information that needs to be disseminated to people, but also, if you're building up your own sort of perspective in an area like, Emacs, free software, etc., you probably want to write a bunch of different things for yourself so that you can have your own way of thinking, your own ideas that you can share on your channel to make things even more unique. So this could be useful even if people are not, researchers or published book authors. If you're a person making content on the internet, this could also be very useful to you for increasing the quality of the content that you make and also making it more unique to your own perspective. So the interesting thing here is I don't know that this is very useful for programmers, because programmers are they're writing code, but the thing you can do is synthesize ideas based on writing about, like, let's say, design patterns or different programming techniques, or maybe different programming platforms or languages, like pulling together information about language features, etc. But that's more of a high-level understanding and not really used to create a work out of it in the end. You could say that you might be inspired to have an idea to synthesize two different design patterns or language features and then turn it into code. But I think there's less of a direct production of something in the end for a programmer as there would be for an author or someone creating some other kind of content where they're trying to put ideas together. However, that's not to say that it's not useful at all to programmers, because many programmers are also bloggers, or also writing reports about projects, or writing documentation. Documentation is a great way to apply this method as well, I think. So just to say that programmers can use this, but maybe they won't see the immediate benefits of this approach. But I still think that there's a lot of ideas in this approach that can be applied to make you more effective at your job, and to help you to store information about things that are interesting and useful to you. Let's see. Sasha says, you can use the Zettelkasten for your personal introspection, dream analysis, future planning, and connect to the knowledge on psychology. Sasha, are you one of the authors of Zettelkasten.de? I think that your first name sounds like one of the authors, so maybe you are. And maybe you said that in the chat before, but I didn't see it. Let's see. What else are we saying here in the chat today? Yeah, so one thing that Zettelkasten can be great for is writing down sort of daily thoughts as well, which we'll talk about in the future, or later in the stream. Sasha says, I might be biased, but the Zettelkasten is meant to be a practical framework to give dealing with knowledge concrete habits and actions. So anything that is knowledge can be dealt with the Zettelkasten method. Zettelkasten. Yeah, that's definitely true. I wonder if a radio link could be used to build references from a source code file to a Zettelkasten note in org mode. Well, definitely you can do links into code from links from code into org mode files. So you could definitely do that. So yes, that's fine that you don't you didn't mention it. Just curious, because you do seem to have a lot of background here. Gustavo says, have you dug into Andy Matuszek's notes? I have not, but I know that he has his org-roam or his Roam database online for people to see. All right, so let's see. So how does it work? So at a high level, this method is performed by capturing three kinds of notes: permanent notes, project notes, and fleeting notes. And each of these has their own purpose and lifetime in the system. So some of these notes, like the permanent notes, obviously by the name, are going to be permanently a part of your system. But the other types of notes may not be permanent. They may only exist temporarily, depending on what you're using them for. So the permanent notes are the notes that you're going to want to keep forever. Those are the real meat of the system, where a lot of your thinking, a lot of the things you've been finding in your research are going to stay, and you're going to want to keep these notes alive, either through reviewing them or through editing them over time to improve the quality of them. And they're the ones that will give you the most long-term value. So that's where you're going to get all your insights from, and it will be sort of just a long-term companion for you as a knowledge base that you've built up yourself. So each note in the permanent notes will be focused on a single idea and written in full prose, but still short. You're not going to want to write a whole document inside of one of these notes. You're going to write something that's more tailored to the specific idea that you're talking about. And we'll break that down a little bit further later when we talk about how we would apply this. But the idea being that you need to give enough context about the idea so that if you look at the note in isolation, you can understand what it's about. And also you would need to have links to other related ideas as well so that you kind of have this network of knowledge that you're building in your Zettelkasten to give you that value over time of having these relationships between ideas. So in the actual system that was developed by Niklas Luhmann, the permanent notes are given alphanumeric identifiers so that you can make links between them. And the interesting thing about this identifier approach is that there is a numbering system that actually introduces locality between the notes. So based on the way that these notes are numbered, you can actually infer relationships between them just by looking at the numbering. And the Zettelkasten website has a really good example of this, if it opens correctly. Let's see. Come on, cute browser. Here we go. So this image here does a good job of explaining it, and I think my browser's dark mode is making it hard to see the lines. But the idea being that, let's say you have 4 notes, numbered 0 through 3, and maybe you want to introduce a new note that's actually related to note 1. The numbering system that Luhmann uses is to insert a note after the note 1 with A after the 1. So you're sort of alternating between numeric and alphabetical enumeration on the notes that are being inserted here. And if you want to have another note after 1 that is related to 1 and sort of should be in the same sphere, you would make it 1B, 1C, etc. Now, if you wanted to go even further down into sort of a hierarchical, it's not really hierarchical organization, but it's sort of like a relationship. You can also do a 3rd level of numbering and 4th level, 5th level, etc. So you would have 1A1, 1A2, etc. So this is a way for you to insert information in proximity to other related topics in case, like for instance, maybe you have one note about a topic and then you need to do some clarifications, or maybe you have another idea you have that you want to capture about it, but you want to have it nearby. You can organize your IDs and even the sorting, I guess, if you have a physical paper slip box, you could do it this way. So this is a really interesting aspect of this because it gives the person who owns the slip box a way to quickly find things they're looking for. And if you find a particular note, then the things that are related to it should be physically nearby in the way that you've organized it, or at least with the numbering that you have here. So kind of a genius idea for being able to find things easily. I mean, obviously, there's other kinds of numbering systems that do things sort of like this. I guess maybe the Dewey Decimal System, if I'm not completely speaking out of turn here. Things like that for books and other things that, people have figured out that this kind of numbering system is useful. But for this particular use case, I think it's kind of a great idea for locality of information. So though that numbering helps to identify clusters of notes, since all the related notes around a particular area of topics will have IDs that share the same prefix. So it's really easy to find those. So there's a few kinds of permanent notes that you would see in your system. The first being the main notes. Those are the ones that are actually about the ideas that you have and the concepts that you're tracking and anything that you're writing about. There's also the literature notes, which is really important for researchers who are looking at research papers or maybe books, or I guess anyone who's reading books, or maybe even like website articles. These literature notes are your notes about a specific piece of literature, so that if you wanted to refer back to those, you could do that. Because usually what you're going to do is start writing about an idea that you have, and maybe you've read a couple books that are related to that, and you want to link to those books in your Zettelkasten so that you can follow those paths and see what notes you had written about that book as well, to kind of have all that stuff together whenever you're doing your research. And structure or hub notes. So this is more like an index note in the sense that whenever you have many notes about a lot of different topics and they're not really organized like based in a way that's easy to find them, like alphabetically or maybe even like hierarchically or something like that, you need to have a way to index the different ideas that you have, and maybe even different levels of hierarchy, index them So these structure notes or hub notes are basically like an index of topics or concepts. So you might have like a one very, very high level note that points you to the high levels of the different topics that you think about or you write about, like, you know, programming languages or software or, you know, mathematics or things like that. And then you would maybe go down into further levels of granularity to point to the different topics that are related to, or the different notes that are related to those topics. Though I think the idea is not necessarily that you would rely on this. It's really just another tool you can use for finding your, reviewing the things you've written so far so that you don't lose notes. Because if a note doesn't have a link to something else, then it's easier to lose track of it and you might not forget that you even have that information. So it's good to have some way to link to everything that you have from some kind of structure, basically. And that's what these structure notes are for. I think that the Zettelkasten website has some good information about that as well, if you want to check that out. Project notes. These are probably the notes that most org mode users are familiar with, because many people are using org mode for managing projects and to-do lists and whatnot. And these are the notes that are going to help you to organize your work on a particular project. So a project note is basically the information you want to store at a high level about a project and the sort of tasks that you need to do about that. However, you don't really store a lot of information about the project in these notes, because that all should be in your slipbox or in your permanent notes, basically. So these project notes typically should be less in depth and more just sort of pointers to information that are relevant to the project that you are working on. And a project note is only kept for the lifetime of the project that it refers to, and then either archived or discarded once the project is complete. So it's not something that you're supposed to keep around, because what you're trying to do is only keep the things in your head that you need to at any given point in time. So if you have, you know, only 3 projects that you're really focused on, you don't want to have a bunch of other project notes around that are sort of reminding you of things that you're not currently working on. Maybe you want to put them away so that you don't think about them, or maybe the project is done and you don't need to see information about a completed project whenever you're trying to look at the things that are currently active. So either you would just get rid of the project notes after completion, or you would archive them away somewhere else. And in the Zettelkasten workflow, these notes are actually kept separately from the slipbox. So the main notes that you have, the ones that are all numbered and organized together, those go in one place, and your project notes go somewhere else entirely so that they don't get mixed together, basically. Also helps you to make sure that you can discard them without any concern. Let's see if I'm missing anything from the chat here. So anyone says the Z in Zettelkasten is pronounced more like a TS, like a Zettelkasten. Okay. These nuances of speaking German are difficult for me, obviously, is because I'm not a German speaker. Mohammed says, somewhat off topic, I think you're a ThinkPad user. Have you seen the Framework laptop? Is that the one that you can replace pieces? If so, yeah, I've seen it. It's a little bit thick for my taste. Let's see. Garjola says, settles are not quick captures, but written after a bit of reflection. Yeah, the main notes are definitely ones that are written after reflection and not just sort of things you're jotting down, basically. And with software tools, we have the tendency to do lots of quick captures and less of real thinking. And because of org capture being so straightforward, yeah, that's a big problem, something I'll talk about in a minute. John says, I have a feeling it's more suited to taking notes for reading a book. For other tasks like lecture and meeting, you'll probably would generate too much content and end up too much work for Link. Yeah, you don't want to just throw lecture notes inside of a main note. You definitely want to digest that information and then turn it into actual topic notes in your slip box that you've written yourself. It's not just capturing someone else's information. Nova says, so I can use it while, say, I'm reviewing my notes from school and basically compiling what I learned in an organized manner. Yes, absolutely. Star7 says, can we create 2 slipbox, one for personal and one for work? You could do that. Yeah, I don't really see any reason why not. However, you know, it might be interesting to see where things overlap a little bit between the things that you know from both places. And can you do that in OrgRoam? Yes, you can do that in OrgRoam by setting, so for a particular folder that you want to be its own slipbox, you need to set a directory local variable to change the org roam path. I forgot what the variable name is, but if you set that variable inside the the directory local variables file, dir.locals.el, then that will work. John says, I tried and had a hard time with it. So maybe it's not directly easy, but I have heard other people doing it. Garjola says, and you usually review Zettl's in order to improve them and refine them, adding links between notes, etc. Yeah, you definitely have to review and polish those over time. It's not like you just write one and you just leave it there forever. Typically, you are refining the ideas over time. Wanjin Kim says, it's more like Zettelkasten. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's see. Anything else here? Yep, that's the last of that. All right, so let's talk about, oh, wait. Interesting, did I not put one for fleeting notes? Great. Apparently I forgot that one when I was doing the notes today. So let's talk about fleeting notes. So, fleeting notes. The idea behind fleeting notes is that you're basically just capturing whatever thoughts or ideas or things you need to do through the day in whatever way is appropriate. So capturing So the idea is that if you just have like a notebook with you or like a piece of paper or a napkin, or maybe you do a voice recording on your phone, any of these things can be considered to be fleeting notes. And the idea is just to make sure that you get whatever's in your head down into a note so that it can be remembered and then processed later. Because all of us, as we're thinking, as we're reading or working during the day, we're gonna have thoughts or ideas, and you really need to be able to capture these things in a way that that you will handle them later. And if you've ever read the book Getting Things Done by David Allen, this is sort of a big part of that whole approach as well. Basically, just to make sure that whenever you have a thought, or if you remember you need to do something, you need to just capture it somewhere, and then just make sure that you have a reliable method for taking those things that you've captured and then working them into your system. So what Garjola says is true here. Fleeting notes are your capture inbox to digest and feed the ZK. So a lot of times you won't have time to write down your full thoughts on something. So you might need to just write down sort of the seed of the idea that you have, so that later you can go back and sit down and write an actual note in your permanent notes, a main note about that topic. And when you do that, you want to kind of give the context of the idea and write out things in full sentences, so that later the information can be used for an article or a book you're writing, or maybe just to give yourself the appropriate context when you come back to that idea. Because the idea is that eventually you will come back to this idea whenever you are traversing your knowledge graph or working on similar concepts, basically. Ashra says, you have a fleeting notes section in your org file. It may be empty, though. Well, I'll have to look at that after the stream. Let's see. Yeah, that one is a different one. We'll talk about that in a second. So, fleeting notes are meant to be thrown away. And this is something that's interesting for those of us who are using org mode and have used org capture. Because a lot of times the things that you capture with org capture doesn't get thrown away. It's more like it gets worked into the system somehow. And I think this is how people get into trouble a little bit with org mode, because if you can capture all kinds of crap that you're thinking about all day long, then you're going to make your documents, your to-do lists overwhelmed with information. So the idea is that for fleeting notes, ideally, once you've processed a note that you have, you would just get rid of it, because you don't want to have that lingering around with your system. You want to actually have processed this note to turn it into a full note of some kind, or maybe add it to your list of project notes or something like that. Fleeting notes are meant to be discarded after being processed. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about how can we apply Zettelkasten correctly in org roam. And this is a place where I'm definitely interested to hear all of your feedback, because I have not done it perfectly myself. So we're sort of talking as a group about how this might be done. Now that you have the context for all the things we talked about before, how would you apply it correctly? So in my opinion, org roam shines for permanent notes, because you have this ability to store a lot of different information very efficiently. It's very easy to create and find notes using the org-roam node find command, and also create links between them with org-roam node insert. So if you wanted to create that graph of knowledge, like you saw in the previous video about org-roam, it's very easy to do that. But that's sort of not a great thing in some ways, because it also does sort of encourage you to create a lot of notes about things that maybe aren't really fully baked yet. So I think that it's important to be careful about how easy it is to use this, because since it's not like a paper source of notes where you have to keep them organized and maybe like it's very bulky, you're going to be a lot more indiscriminate about creating new notes. So it's sort of a blessing and a curse in that way. And the fact that you can do links between the notes and see the backlinks is also very useful. But the question is, do the backlinks actually give you the same visibility into clustering of topics that the Slipbox does, or at least the numbering of the Slipbox does? And the answer really is not really, or at least not by default, because the IDs that are assigned to your notes using org-roam are completely opaque. They're UUIDs that are kind of, nonsensical. There's no ordering to them. There's no, proximity to other IDs in the format of the org-roam ID. And that's because they're actually just IDs for org notes. So some feature that's already in org that org-roam just uses. So that's why the ID model is not really as effective for finding related topics. However, the thing about org-roam is that there's an API that people can build things on top of to analyze the notes that you have and the links between them. So a tool like org-roam UI could actually help with this. And I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's a very new project. This is meant for org-roam v2. There was a tool like this for org-roam v1, but it did not get updated for org-roam v2. However, this one is very new. I think it's quite interesting because it's implemented natively in Emacs, at least for the parts that serve the information to you. And you view the knowledge graph that you have in a browser, and I don't know if this is actually a screenshot of what it looks like, but the idea is that if you have a way to visualize the connections between all of the nodes inside of your Slipbox, then you might be able to uncover areas where there's a lot more connections between information and then dive into those. So I have not installed this yet. I haven't used it at all. I will talk about it in a future video, but for now, I'm just pointing it out to you that there is a way to look at the connections between information in org-roam using tools like this. So it's not really the same as what you would see with a paper Slipbox implementation, but it is something that you could use to get a similar type of benefit, I think. And it could also be useful for a sort of visualization standpoint, because just this by itself is pretty interesting, because you're like, oh, what's this? Like, something here has a lot of connections. So it must be an area that you've invested a lot of thinking into. And then there's also these little sort of hub and spokes here in some areas that are standalone. So I don't know, maybe you can sort of think of how you might take a look at these areas and then connect them somehow. But a very interesting project. It's kind of early in development, so there may be bugs. So if you try to use this, definitely file issues on this repo so that the authors can try to fix those. But I think that there will be a lot of activity around this project, so probably it will become mature pretty soon. So also, with the infinite space of an org-roam document, will you be able to keep notes short and single topic? This is actually a problem I've had when using org-roam, where you basically just turn a single node in your Slipbox, or a single file in your Slipbox, into like a dumping ground for thoughts about a particular area. And maybe even mix in to-do items to treat it like project notes at the same time. So you're using one note, one topic, to contain a lot of information that probably should be broken into their own specific topics. So this is something that you have to be very careful about, because at first there's nothing really stopping you from doing this. Now, this is Emacs, obviously, so you could write any number of Emacs Lisp integrations to limit yourself from writing too much, or at least tell you, hey, maybe there's too much information in this note. But by default, you can just write however much you want inside of a particular node. And also, I would say the fact that org-roam v2 gives you the ability to have headings also be nodes encourages this misuse, I think, of individual notes. So I'm not sure how I feel about that really. I think it's better if you sort of focus on a specific idea and not really have other things around to distract you or to encourage you to write more than you really need to for one idea. So consider the following two note titles. Zettelkasten in Org-Roam, or Can You Apply Zettelkasten in Org-Roam? So the difference here, in my opinion, is that one of them is a sort of general high-level topic, so applying Zettelkasten in Org-Roam, and you could write any number of things there, all kinds of thoughts and ideas you have about it, etc. Whereas the second one here is actually a very specific question that you're answering to yourself: can you apply Zettelkasten in Org-Roam? And I think this is the direction you need to be heading in whenever you're using Org-Roam to implement Zettelkasten, because the best type of notes you can write are the ones that are very single purpose. You're trying to talk about one specific idea or one specific topic in very sort of narrow terms, because that needs to fit into an overall graph of information. So if you have a big document that has a lot of things in there, then it becomes more complicated to link between things, and you don't really get that sort of locality of information that comes back to you through the graph. So it's really important to start writing notes that are more pinpointed like this. And the other interesting thing that occurred to me is that if you're single topic on your notes, it also allows you to evolve your ideas without source control. And it sounds kind of weird to say that, but one thing I've been thinking about with my org notes is that I would like to have it set up so that I check in my textual notes to source control, so that I can actually, hold on to things in case, like maybe I rewrite a particular document or a particular note, and I wanted to see what it was before. I think that's actually not the right thing to do, rewriting and then checking it in so that you can see the differences. I think what you actually should be doing is continuing the dialogue about a particular idea in a separate note, and then you have both of those things there in case you wanted to see them, and also connect them to some other higher level idea. So if to apply it here, there's a question: can you apply Zettelkasten in Org-Roam? And maybe later you sort of convince yourself that you can do it. So maybe you write a note called why you should apply Zettelkasten in Org-Roam. And you'll have both of those notes around so that you have that context for yourself about sort of what your thought process was and sort of the contrasting views that maybe you had about a particular topic. And then you don't have to treat them as a same note or same idea that have to be checked into source control and see the history on. You sort of see that those two ideas exist sort of together, and you can tie them together maybe at a higher level note to say, how your perspective on the topic changed. So if you can try to write notes like this, I think that it will be a lot better for you to see how your own thinking develops over time. However, I would be very much interested to hear the opinions of the people in chat to see if you have seen this yourself, or maybe other thoughts you have about how you could apply that. Let me go take a look at what people have been saying. Ashra says, sorry, my bad. No, it's no problem. Garjola says, I have OrCapture store the links to the point in the EPUB, PDF, or website I'm reading, so that afterwards I can get back to it and generate clean content for the ZK. Yeah, it's a really useful thing to do. A. Cortez says, when you process your fleeting notes, it's a good opportunity to improve your already existing notes and connections in your ZK. Absolutely. That's something I don't really do, but I should do. If you have a new idea, it doesn't necessitate making a new note. What it may necessitate is adding information to existing notes, even multiple notes, and then maybe making new connections between those things. That way, over time, you're actually improving the quality of the things you've written already, and not just sort of creating a dumping ground for any thought that crosses your mind. And this is sort of where I think a lot of the value of permanent notes comes in. A problem I've had in the past is that I have a lot of thoughts in various areas, like let's say, philosophy or personal productivity, a lot of sort of higher level concepts. And as you go through life, generally your thoughts on these things will change or evolve, or maybe you'll get new ideas. And a lot of times what I would do is write in a journal about all this stuff. But when you do that, all you have is just sort of like these points in time of information that are disconnected, and you don't have a good way to go back and look at them again. So maybe you're going to have the same thought again, but you don't have the context of what you thought before to help you to sort of put the new idea into your existing thought framework around it. So if you use this process to take these new ideas you have and put them into existing notes that you have and have a really good process for integrating them into these notes, then it's easier for you to have a sort of footing in your ideas, in your personal philosophy, etc., to build on top of things you've thought before and also see how things evolve over time. You can't really do that with a journal because you'd have to go read the old journal entries, you'd have to know where things are in your journal, and at that point you might as well be inventing something like Zettelkasten for your journal, and really you should be doing that in your Zettelkasten to begin with. So I kind of feel like writing about ideas in your journal is not the right place to do it. You should actually do that in notes in Zettelkasten so that you can actually see them develop over time. Let's see. Dustin says, I use a daily note as a stream of headlines with date, time, and whatever I'm doing. One long list of fleeting notes, jump off point to get things into the ZK. Yeah, definitely. We'll talk about that in a second with fleeting notes. Garjola says, you apply inbox 0 to your fleeting notes. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. John says, I find only 1% of fleeting notes ended up being converted into permanent notes. And that's kind of the point, is that many times fleeting notes are really just fleeting and they're not important or useful enough to keep. And if you do keep them, you just got a lot of noise and you're probably just going to ignore all the things you've written in your notes because you don't want to see all that stuff. Satya says, the structure note concept aims to improve on what Luhmann did to achieve with his IDs. Yeah, so that's another way to basically have that locality, is to have a structure note that gives you the ability to see things that are related. Pavel says you can assign your own IDs, though. I think these IDs are org native IDs. Definitely, if you can assign your own IDs, then you could do that, but I think that becomes a pain. However, I mean, that's what Luhmann was doing, so maybe it's not that big of a deal. If you wanted to assign your own notes, I think org mode will use it just fine, and org roam. Christian says the IDs that org roam creates look like year, month, day, hour, minute, seconds. That's in org roam v1. In v2 they've changed it. Sasha says they work as a visualization also. Yeah, the structure notes could do that for sure. I think the structure notes are kind of a nice way to curate your own conceptual framework as well. They're kind of fun to make, actually. Let's see. Garjola says you can write elist to destroy your note when it gets too long. Good for self-discipline. Yeah, just prevent yourself from typing further characters. Let's see. Edits to notes are just for minor things, wording, adding leaks, but not for expanding. Better to add new notes for that and link to them. Yeah, it really depends, I think. Nicholas says, can the knowledge graph be too granular? I'm concerned that too many small notes can make it harder to access key information. I'd be interested to hear Satya's thoughts about that, but I think that the idea is that it should be granular because you're trying to deal with ideas in a more atomic sense, like just single idea to connect it to a graph so that you can get the benefits of what this graph can tell you. So the reason why Luhmann's paper is called Communicating with Slipboxes is because he considers it a dialogue between himself and the slipbox that he's written. The ability to look for an idea and find things that are related to it is really, it's important to have these relationships between the different topics, and you can't do that so well if you have more monolithic notes. You have to have smaller notes and have this system to structure them and find the links between them. So I think that really is the point. The point is to have more granular notes. The more granular, the better. Now, obviously, if every one of your notes is a single sentence, maybe it's not that useful, but typically, if you have a thought, you have something to say about it, maybe a paragraph. So that's probably the right level. Ashra says, wouldn't key information nodes have more links to them? If the nodes are sized according to their incoming links, then key information would be more prevalent than the seldomly linked one. Yeah, the number of inbound links is definitely a way to assess the importance of a topic. Charlie says, is Zettelkasten what Americans might call a card catalog? Yes. Yeah, that might be a good way to put that. I mean, the whole index card organization approach is something that a lot of people have used. Apparently, comedians have used it a lot. But it may not be exactly the same as what's being done here. I'm not really sure. Garjola says, I guess you can apply graph algorithms to the full graph to prune, extract connected components and clusters, better having more granularity than fewer. Yeah, I agree with that. Jakob says, org drill is to move notes into your long-term memory based on supermemo algo, spaced repetition. That's interesting. I guess it's a different process for dealing with your personal knowledge. Dustin says, I use OrgRoam as also a CRM. I keep notes on people in Slipbox, I guess because all files are mixed. Do others do the same? Yeah, I actually do that in OrgRoam. Like maybe if there's a coworker I have who, excuse me, I have like things I need to remember to tell them about, or maybe details about what they work on. You know, you can do that with customers. You can do that with really anybody that is relevant to you and what you do on a day-to-day basis. So there's really nothing wrong with that. Ramses says, there is orgfc as an alternative of orgdrill. Velocity says, does OrgRoam force you to use IDs? It does now. Previously, the ID was baked into the file name in OrgRoam v1, but now IDs are actually inserted into the buffer for your OrgRoam files. Also says, can you just use file names and be careful about not overwriting? I think the reason why the IDs are being used now is because of leveraging OrgMode's existing system for linking things together. But I could be wrong about that. I think part of it is because they don't want to use file names for linking, because file names can either have conflicts or maybe change over time, that kind of thing. Garjola says ZK plus GTD is a very good combo. GTD does not propose a good way to deal with reference material, and ZK is perfect for that. On the other hand, GTD workflow helps to manage huge amounts of input fleeting. Yeah, and GTD also gives you a good framework for doing reviews of your projects and your tasks over time at different levels of granularity. So I think they go together really nicely. Christian says, greetings from Bielefeld, aka Lumantown. Christian is another one of the authors of the Zettelkasten.de website. It's a government secret location. Okay. Let's see. Fix says, you should probably stream under a category like science and technology on Twitch for better discoverability. What does it say that I'm on right now? Because it should have been set to that. Maybe Restream didn't do that right. Let's see. Echo says, buenas noches. Glad I managed to catch up with the stream. Glad you're here. Garjola, OrgRoam allows implementing ZK, but can be used for more than that, like CRM, which is very different when storing concepts and relationships between them. Yes. CRM typically is a little bit more involved, I think, because you're trying to track sort of the path of a customer over time, if I'm remembering things correctly. Nicholas says, would love a video on OrgDrill. Yeah, maybe in the future. Sacha says, yes, they can be too granular. It's a bit difficult to describe in chat, but it happens if you don't grasp the atom, but move too far. Quants. That's a good point. Let's see. Bashscript says, the YouTube chat looks different. Is that a pop-out chat box? This is actually the chat for Restream.io, which is a service that allows me to stream to multiple services at the same time. As you can see, there's YouTube comments and Twitch at the same time. Duarte says, I like having settles that act as tags to join a lot of the nodes on the graph. Yeah, that's one way to do it. Dural says, I like that Roam lets me save things from my brain and organize them later to make them useful. Other kinds of note-taking applications force their workflow on me, and I dislike that. Definitely. Yeah, I agree with that. Sacha says, the heuristic for that is that you don't feel that you captured a full thought. However, if you use structured notes extensively, there is more tolerance. Yep. A Cortez, I'm considering using space repetition. Haven't done it yet, though. Christian says, Emacs is not that great with tons of files, but longer files with tons of org headings work great. Yeah, but I don't know if that's a good way to do Zettelkasten in Emacs, because I feel like it's going to cause you to put too much information in files, but maybe I'm wrong about that. The whole point of OrgRoam, though, is to make it so that it is a lot more efficient with many, many files, because it's indexing things into a database so that it can be queried efficiently. And the situation there has improved quite a lot with OrgRoam v2 because they changed the database backend to something that is more native to Emacs Lisp. So they have direct line to SQLite database. And I think the updates are pretty much instant now. Fix says, it's showing that you were under no category at the moment. Well, that's not good. Sasha says, if you have a bunch of definitions for the same term, each definition can be one note, but that in itself would feel too granular. How would you end up with a bunch of definitions for the same term? I guess if there's like different contexts where that term can come from. But if you have a structured note to gather all definitions and work out the relationships, you will go instinctively to the structured note if you think about that matter. Yeah. It would be good if you could prioritize structured notes somehow, or at least mark them in your system so that you can refer to those first in case you're looking for a specific topic to get your bearings before you start looking into the individual notes. Garjola says, let's see. Oh, Dustin says earlier, GTK plus ZK plus Emacs took me 20 years to get here. Garjola says, me too, 20 years since starting Emacs, 12 since GTD with org mode, and 2 since ZK. Yeah, I started doing GTD and Emacs probably in 2014, 2015, something like that. And GTD even before that with like paper and whatnot. All right, let's go on to project notes. How would you apply project notes? I mean, obviously, since we know that org mode deals with project notes very easily because, you know, that's what a lot of people use org mode for. Org Roam can also be great for this. Now, the interesting thing is that you can use the org agenda to take your project notes. If you have them stored in your org Roam database as nodes, you can actually pull those in and show them in your org agenda. And since you have the ability to do tagging of files with org Roam, you can just use, excuse me, the API to the org Roam database to find all of your nodes or your files that have the project tag or whatever tag you like, and then add those to your org agenda. And it makes it so that you get a dynamic agenda based on what your projects are currently and the ones that are active actually. So that's something we'll talk about in another video where we talk about like actually customizing the use of org Roam. But just know for now that you can definitely use your project notes in org Roam and in org agendas at the same time. Excuse me, I'm having some major issues here with itchiness. You can also, in your project notes, link directly to permanent notes, which means that in like to-do items in your project notes, you can have links that go straight to certain topics, which means you have backlinks that can bring you back to a particular task for a given topic. So that could be pretty useful. Also, excuse me, the question is, can you archive project notes? So if you store your project notes in org Roam, let's say you don't put them in a normal org mode file, you put them in org Roam, can you archive them? Well, I mean, obviously you can just move the file out of the Roam folder, which is fine. You could do that if you wanted to. But I think that if you use the tagging functionality of org Roam to tag the file to say that it's archived, then you could use the org Roam database API to get a list of all your project notes without the ones that have also been marked as archived. So you could also even filter them out of your main listing of nodes whenever you use org Roam node find, I think this command is, or write your own custom function that looks up whatever ones you want. The nice thing about org Roam is that you don't have to be beholden to whatever workflow they've decided for you. It's actually a set of tools to build your own workflow. So you don't have to use the main org Roam node find command. You can actually make your own command that lists only the nodes that you care about by pulling them from the database. So there's any number of ways that you could interact with this and come up with your own way to archive a project or archive a particular note or anything like that. However, if you do use that approach of tagging to archive a project, that project will still show up in your backlinks for other nodes, and that could be a good or bad thing depending on how you look at it. Excuse me. Satya brings up a good point. If you want to make it easy to find your structure notes, you can use 2 hash marks at the beginning of the title to make it so that it shows up in a way that you can see in your listing of nodes. There's also a way to add tags to nodes like I mentioned. However, there's also a way to even customize the display of the individual nodes when they show up in that listing of the nodes that you're trying to find, so you can mark them as structured nodes, etc. We'll talk about that also in another video about customization of org Roam. Velocity says, I was using Obsidian before and I liked that my links were just program independent, just file names. Org just seems too powerful to resist looking into. So one problem I see with org Roam is that this may not be a problem for most people, but let's say you want to, excuse me, share your org Roam files with other people on a GitHub repository. because of the way that org-roam files are named, where they have the date and everything inside the name, it is not so nice to have those files checked into a Git repository for other people to look at, because if you don't really know what the relationship between the files are, because you're seeing these files that have like a timestamp at the beginning and then some topic. So it's better if you were to generate a website out of your org-roam notes, which you can do with org export. You may need some customization to make it look right, but that would give you the ability to display your notes for other people. Now, that's sort of not really what Velocity was talking about, but I sort of got there by thinking that if the notes are just normal file names, then it's easier for you to sort of understand what the purpose are of all the files. Maybe you have a better hierarchy of files, etc. Not necessarily the same with org-roam. Sasha says, attention as a psychological resource, attention as a spotlight. I really like that concept. It lines up with a lot of things I've been thinking about attention as well. I like to think about attention as sunlight. Whatever you put your attention on grows. So you need to manage your attention as much as the information that you use, because wherever you put your attention is where things are going to happen. So if you have a really good system for setting things up where you can focus your attention effectively, then it's going to help that thing grow. You're cultivating it like a garden, basically. We're talking about the Zettelkasten. Let's see. Is there a way to label links between notes, kind of like a graph database? Only with the title of the link, I think. Sasha says, I have half a dozens of definitions, or perhaps better, for attention. Oh, okay. I understand. Yes, that's why you're talking about attention. Let's see. Bash script. Is Restream free and open source software? No, it's definitely not. It's a paid web service. Yep. John says, so I can convert structured notes into org-roam with tags. Well, the structured notes would be part of your org-roam database. So you're saying to implement the same thing? Not sure. Yeah, not sure what you mean. Garjola says, I would hesitate to mix projects and ZK. I mean, projects in the sense of action tracking and planning. I would do that with plain org mode. I agree. That's what I was also thinking when I was writing this. It might be better to use plain org mode files instead of org-roam files for tracking projects, but there's nothing stopping you from doing one or the other, and you might find very interesting ways to use roam files. Satya says, I mean, instead just use hash attention or hash attention for your central structure note on that matter. Duarte says, my org-roam files don't have the name. I took the slug out. Well, that you could do that, but I think you might end up with problems if you use the same name on two notes, which is actually possible. And it's not great that you can do that, but it is possible. Garjola says, ZK is personal, not to be shared. It is your second brain. Would you share that? Black Mirror. Well, some people do. I don't know why I wouldn't do it, because I have too much like personal information and like proprietary information of my own inside of my ZK. So yeah, I don't think I would ever put mine online. I mean, if I had a separate one that was just for concepts that, you know, weren't personal, then maybe. I think the idea is that instead of sharing your ZK, you should be sharing the fruits of your ZK through writing books or blog articles, etc. John, yeah, because really your ZK may not really be that useful to other people because it's sort of your own mental structure. So I don't really know how much value someone else could get out of that. John says, I have a lot of structured notes and I want to give them life by converting them to Zettelkasten. Well, you could do that pretty easily. Just drop them into your org-roam folder, and I think there's a command you need to run to give the org file an ID. Satya says, your definition will be absorbed by my Zettelkasten. Awesome concept with appropriately referencing you as a source. Well, thank you. It's something I've been thinking about for a while. It's attention is a very interesting resource, I think. John says, is there a solution to allow multiple people share their second brains for collaboration? Git repo. The nice thing about org-roam is that the database for org-roam does not have to be synced between machines for it to be used, only the source files. So if you check in your org-roam files into a Git repository, sync them between multiple machines, Org Roam will re-index all the information whenever you open the files up. You may have to run the org roam db sync command or something like that to make sure that it happens, but there's nothing stopping you from doing that. You could totally do that. John, oh yeah. So Garjola says you can filter by structure notes. Yeah, if you put a tag on them, you can definitely do that. Garjola says one of the great benefits of ZK is the work you do while building it. Thinking, generating ideas as ZK without the first brain is somewhat dead. Yeah, you're kind of looking at the point in time corpse of ideas, I guess you could say. It's kind of a weird way to look at it, but maybe corpus is the right way to look at it. But anyway, the idea is that, yeah, if you're not, ZK is meant for sort of a conversation with yourself. If you look at the actual definition of what it's supposed to be, or the perspective of the person who created the concept. So I think that sharing it directly is not necessarily the greatest thing, but you could do it if you wanted to. If you wanted to make a website with yours, you could definitely do it. It's just a matter of whether people would find it useful. I've looked at Jethro Kwan's website that he has his ZK on, and it's interesting to look at it, but I don't know that I got any information from it that was useful to me. So fleeting notes. So this is one place where org roam may deviate from the ZK method. Because everything that you capture with org mode can be easily kept forever, will you actually discard notes that should just be fleeting reminders? So when you have a system that makes it very easy to capture and store information, how are you actually going to make sure that you don't keep things that don't belong? So if you use org capture to capture like some thought you have, will you have the discipline to actually take that thought and turn it into information in your slipbox, or will you just leave it sitting raw in some other place where it doesn't belong and where it's not really useful anymore? It's definitely possible, but if you're going to invest yourself into using this technique, I think that you should try your best to use fleeting notes for what they're meant for, which is basically to jot down an idea so that you can go back to it later and then integrate it into your system. But then you can think, should you even really care about discarding these things? I think the only time that you should care about it is if the old notes get in the way. So if you start seeing all these half-baked thoughts that you have as fleeting notes, are they going to distract you from the real valuable information that's inside of your ZK? And I think it really just depends on who you are and how you use org capture, or what kind of notes you jot down. For me, I think the problem I've had is that it's easy for me to use the org roam dailies feature to write basically a journal entry and write down a lot of thoughts on a topic, and then just leave that there and maybe link it to some things in my ZK, and then just sort of expect that in the future at some point I'm going to go look at those backlinks and find that information again. But the reality is I probably won't. So it's kind of dangerous to just depend on capture and keeping with things that you capture, because you're not going to polish that information and put it into a usable form that's going to give you value in the long term. So as I mentioned, there's a dailies feature in org roam, which is basically like org journal. If you ever used org journal before, it creates files, like a file for the current day, basically to give you a place to capture notes about the day. But it is linked into all the other files that you have in your org roam notes. And it's very useful for capturing those fleeting notes and linking them, but I think that you're gonna end up not making them discardable, because you're gonna think, oh, I can just look at the links and see what I need to see. Really, we should be using that feature to capture temporary notes and then put them into the system, and then never expect to see those notes again. You can keep the file if you want to have sort of historical data about what you worked on a given day or what thoughts you had on a particular day, but you shouldn't try to use that as a resource of information. You should only use it as sort of historical information if you wanted to go back and look at it, but you shouldn't require looking at it. So the thing I mentioned earlier that I've sort of come to realize is that even though it's great to use this for journaling, I kind of feel like if you're going to spend the effort to write down thoughts, you might as well try to make them into actual main notes in your permanent notes about the topic that you're writing about, because probably you are elaborating on a particular topic area or idea or a plan that you have or something like that that would have value inside of your notes and not just as a random journal entry. Sometimes it's just going to be stuff like what I need to do today, which is just more like planning information, which you don't need to keep. But if you're sort of writing sort of strategic thoughts about something like a project that you want to do, or maybe writing something more philosophical or something like that, maybe you want to write that as a full note and not a journal entry. So that's something I'll be trying to work into my own system, because I think that I'm losing a lot of good ideas that I have as journal entries when they could be worked into the full system and be given back to me whenever I'm working on related topics. And another thing I said before is, building your own sort of philosophy, your own personal framework of ideas. If you start putting all these ideas into journal entries and not integrating them back into your actual framework, then you're losing them. So it's really important to distinguish between the ideas that you have that are part of your own actual framework of thought and the things that are just sort of like daily whatever stuff that you just need to write down to unblock your brain, Abdullah says, this is the first time I catch you live. Thanks for this awesome channel. Thank you. Glad you're here. John says, I see First Brain has to be the interface, so collaboration cannot be based on Second Brain. Well, it depends. If it's if you treat the ZK more like a wiki, then yeah, you could definitely collaborate on it, because maybe you've sort of agreed upon a particular structure and maybe you have structure notes that point to certain things. You could do that, but maybe at that point it's better to use an actual wiki instead. DK the King says, I think one application of hosting a website of your ZK would be when you're talking to someone and want to explain your perspective on a specific concept. You can send them a link to that page. You could do that, but I would almost say that anyone who is thinking about ideas and coming up with your own perspective on them, you should be writing a blog or putting out the information in a way that's actually meant to be consumed by other people, because ideas are better when they're shared with other people. So consider having an actual blog or a YouTube channel or some other way to disseminate the information, and not just, trying to share someone your personal knowledge base, because I think it's better that way if you give more of the context. If you give a single note to someone in your ZK, it's only going to have the context for that specific idea, but a lot of times you need to have more context for the ideas and maybe related concepts together. So it's better if it's a blog post. So I would say actually just have a blog. Take your ZK as inspiration to write your blog, and then everybody will get a lot more value out of it. Garjola says, look for How to Make a Complete Map of Every Thought You Think by Leon Kimbrough. That sounds kind of intense. Vadim says, just easy modeled by simple FS objects, links, files, folders. Yeah, you could do that. Velocity says, have you figured out a way to take these notes on the go, like capturing fleeting thoughts on your phone? Well, the easiest way is just using a plain crappy note app on your phone, whatever comes with the phone, or send yourself an email, or you could use some other type of note-taking app that isn't connected to all your other information. Like, I use an app called Dynalist, which is kind of like a hierarchical organizer app. I just use that for taking short notes, because I used to use it for more, but I just use it for like quick stuff now. There's also the Orgsly app that DK the King mentions here. And then you can actually sync your real org mode files into that app and edit them on mobile, which can be really useful. Martin says, anyone using Org Brain here? Someone mentioned it before, but I haven't seen many people talking about having used it a lot. So I would be interested in more perspectives from people who use that. Sasha says, you might send me your full name if you want to be referenced correctly in the books. I am using your concept of attention. It's David Wilson. Let's see. Garjola says, the point you raise about dailies journaling highlights the usefulness of GTD workflow for organizing and reviewing after capturing. Yeah, if you really want to be productive and do a good job of capturing your ideas and information, you have to have a review process. Otherwise, things just get lost. And for a person like me who is really focused on whatever the shiny thing is on any given day and having a hard time on doing things like having a good workflow, it's even more important, because then you just forget all kinds of stuff that you're supposed to be doing, any ideas that you have, etc. So the most important thing that anyone can do to make themselves more productive, or at least just to have better control over their own thought process and ideas, is to do some kind of daily or weekly review process. And you can go in doing monthly reviews and stuff like that too if you want to get really into it. But daily and weekly reviews of some sort are very important. By daily review, either at the beginning of the day, review the things that you did yesterday or the notes you took yesterday and like, process those. Weekly review is also like looking ahead to the week and then processing anything that's sort of undone from the previous week. So just those two things alone are really valuable, I think. And I really need to do that. Christian says, sounds sensible. Have a scratch pad to think by writing anywhere, e.g. in a journal, but when it's state to be useful, extract it to a long-lived note, settle. Yeah, I think it needs to be, you need to really work that in. And this is me speaking as a person who understands these concepts and hasn't actually implemented them, but I think that it makes a lot of sense to me that this is the way that it should be done. Let's see. Star7 says, I use Organize PWA app, which takes notes from Dropbox and works in Android and iOS. Yeah, I've heard about Organize, and there's like Borg as well. I think both of those may be like web-based. They could be pretty good. Garjola says, the last piece of the puzzle, Pomodoro, to force you to sit down and review all captures. It seems there's a video about that. Yeah, it actually is a good point. I think there's like this sort of constellation of different techniques that if used together and actually like used in a disciplined way would make people not forget anything. Because if you use time boxes or Pomodoros to time box the amount of time you spend on something, then it doesn't seem like this thing that you dread doing because you know it's only going to be 20 minutes you're going to spend on it. So if you spend that time and actually get the value out of reviewing your system and processing your notes, then things are going to get so much easier that it will just sort of snowball into greater and greater productivity. But I don't know. I'll have to actually accomplish that before I can tell you how to do it. Christian says, recapturing on the go. I find paper notebooks to be the MVP here. Yeah, the Moleskine or any kind of notebooks like that you can kind of carry with you and write things down. It feels very satisfying to have a nice real notebook and something that you can maybe keep later as part of your personal library. People use those for bullet journals and whatnot, which I've done, and it actually is pretty effective. But yeah, in the end, it's better to have some kind of digital way to store your information, especially in a program like Emacs. It makes it really, really easy to search things and to build tools on top of it. Garjola says, ZK plus GTD plus time boxing equals productivity prawn combo. Yeah, I feel like we're back into 2005, 2006, where productivity porn was all the rage. Hey, EBN. Garjola says, how do you pronounce Moleskine? I don't know how to pronounce it. As you can tell, my pronunciation of things is spotty at best. All right. So let's see. What was the next thing I wanted to say? All right. So do you really need org roam for this? And this was a question I was asked a few times after the first org roam video. So why do you need org roam if you can quickly search across all of your org files easily? And my answer to you is maybe you don't need it. I mean, if you have a system that works great for you, using org roam with like maybe a grep or ripgrep or something like that, you don't need to use another tool unless you're interested and you want to try it. Whatever system works for you is what you should be using. I think it's kind of, you should consider other systems at various times if something sounds interesting to you, but there is a trap that people often get into where they try to over-optimize on how they process their information and manage tasks, etc. So there's something to be said for not being distracted by whatever ideas floating around that people seem to be getting excited about. So yeah, you don't need org roam unless you hear about what things it does and also the ideas of the systems that you can build with it, and you decide that that's something that's interesting to you. If all you want is a personal knowledge base with notes that can be linked together, org mode already gives you all the tools you need for that, because you can create links between org mode files, you can tag org mode files, you can build agendas out of org mode files, you can do all kinds of stuff with org mode files already. The thing that org roam does for you is that it removes the need to know where you're going to put your notes, because you just create a note based on the title and not worry about what the file system location is of it. And it makes it way easier for something like Zettelkasten, where you're trying to make notes about specific topics where the title is more than just a file name. It's like, you're answering a question to yourself, or you're writing about like a phrase and then you have more information about it. So I feel like in that case, it's better to use org roam. And even more so, whenever you want to link files together, it makes it way faster because you don't have to go looking for this certain heading in a particular file. You can just look up the name of the node that you're looking for and insert a link to it directly into the buffer. So for really quickly amassing a knowledge base and growing it over time, scaling it, I think OrgRoam is going to be a lot more effective as a tool. And then the real benefit of OrgRoam arises whenever that information can be queried. So either people writing community packages to build stuff on top of OrgRoam, or maybe you even writing your own functionality to customize your workflow with OrgRoam. It gives you a lot of ability to query very efficiently across all of your OrgRoam files for tags, for other information as well. We'll get into greater detail about that in a later video, but I think that because you have access to the database directly, you could do a lot of things with it that are not as easy to do with org mode. Now, you can query across org mode files with a number of different packages, but it has to sort of do that querying on demand and not with a pre-existing database. So it's a lot slower, and maybe you won't be able to do joins of information like you would do in a database. So I feel like OrgRoam has its own area of value, especially if you want to implement something like ZK. Christian says, I'd argue that Paper helps because it's not part of the digital system and gives you a chance to filter and rethink. That's a really good idea, actually. The way that I write notes on the computer might be different than the way that I write notes on paper. And if you're writing notes on the computer, you might be sort of encouraged to try to put things in the right place and do things, and you sort of get sucked into managing your notes instead of actually just writing down a quick note so you can get back to whatever you were doing. Because there's a lot to be said about not diverting your attention from a task. Like if you're working on a task and then a thought pops into your head, oh, I need to pay the rent. You can write that down on a piece of paper and then go back to what you're doing. But you know, in the context of ideas, if an idea pops in your head that sounds really interesting and you're like, oh man, I really want to write about that right now, but I don't have time, write it on a piece of paper just to remind yourself so that you don't have that, I don't know, that reason to go start digging into your actual note files and then later process that note and write it down. So yeah, that's a really good point. Let's see. Christian says, separate capture from keep. I like that idea. Garjola says, good point. I rolled out ZK in a single org file with tags, org ID, and backlinks. I am now writing elisp to migrate to OrgRoam. The power of plain text. Yeah, that's it is powerful, the fact that we can do all these things. Peter Menking says, love the content. Thank you. EBN says, it can show a graph as well, which is good for getting an overview of connection concepts, which I for sure will make use of now that I decided to go back to university. Yeah, I think it would be very, very useful to use it for that purpose. So let's see, Nicholas says, how would you file a time-dependent node? Like, where's my biggest lever in increasing productivity right now? So for topics that are relevant for this specific time that might not be relevant later. That's a good question. I don't know if that's something that your ZK could tell you by itself, unless you were using a GTD-like approach, like the Tickler file, which is a very weird name, but basically, for each month, maybe you have a file that has lists of things you're supposed to remember to do, and then that can kind of trigger you to go look at your files somehow. And you can definitely store that kind of information in OrgRoam pretty easily. I actually do that in my ZK. I have individual nodes for the different months so that I can go look at that month and maybe see if there's anything I need to be reminded of. This is something I experimented with. DK the King says, I've been using literal index cards as my feed and capture, then review them every once in a while and put them into into my OrgRoam files. Yeah, index cards are great for this because they're very easy to carry around. You can keep them in your back pocket and they're easy to throw away. It's not like a notebook where everything's sort of stuck together. You can just throw an index card away. One of the most productive times I ever had was in grad school when I actually used index cards, like a grid of index cards with all my different projects and tasks, sort of GTD style. There's something about index cards that is pretty awesome. I think that they could be a very good tool for this as well. Let's see. Garjola says, I agree, ZK is for more permanent content. That's why I don't see it fit project management. Yeah. Christian says, also computer limits you to text unless you have tablet with pencil. Paper allows tearing, scratching, writing sideways, drawing. Yeah, for sure. Star 7 says, when on paper, I write notes, diagram, a mind map, and math. Easy and efficient. Yeah. And you can also, with org mode, take a picture of that and store it if you needed to, but maybe you wouldn't want to. DK the King says, and then you can get rid of it super easily. Yep. Garzola says, you can easily produce diagrams in org mode, but freehand is not easy, but there's an artist mode. Yeah, there's an artist mode. I haven't really used it, but it seems pretty cool to have that available. All right, let's see. Okay, so now this is the end of what I was going to talk about with ZK, but I'm just curious, like, what other approaches have you used, both with org mode, org room, pen and paper, other programs, anything like that? Like, what else have you used that you thought was really useful and interesting that might actually have some relation to what we've been talking about today? DK the King says, what's artist mode? It's basically like an ASCII-based drawing tool built into Emacs. Let's see. Let's see if it works. I don't know. Oh, in the current buffer? I don't want that. Let's go into the Scratch buffer. Artist mode. Let's see. Yeah, I don't even know what the key bindings are for this mode. Control C. Picture. Oh, do I need like a number pad for this? Because I don't have one of those. Home, end. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, hold on. Yeah, it's not doing anything. Oh. I have no idea. Whoa, I closed my window. There we go. Okay. Nova says, I just got back from trying to revive my Nextcloud server. I missed quite a bit of the live stream. I needed to work on my Nextcloud server also. Something's wrong with it. I keep getting errors in Android. Garzola says, sometimes I draw on paper, take a picture with phone, sync to laptop, and then org download image to insert JPEG into org file. Yep, definitely. EBN says, I've used org capture plus a custom OX Hugo template to capture blog ideas and forget about them until I feel like working on my blog. That's good. Yeah. For me, I just never get back to those whenever that happens. James Brucey says, have you discussed citing papers, e.g. orgref? No, I haven't. Though I do know that using orgref and the like is going to be very useful for people who are doing research, which I think you're probably one of those people. So yeah, I haven't used orgref myself. I need to try to use it to see how it fits into all this. I think John Kitchen has a lot of videos on YouTube about using orgref. Let's see, YouTube. Whoops. Is that it? Oh, that was the live stream. Okay, we'll get this channel that way. Load. I think this particular live stream recording was about org site, which might be related to that. Maybe the new thing. So yeah, you could check out John Kitchen's page on YouTube to see about that. Let's see, what else? Star 7 says, I've used VimWiki as of now. Once I understand about org room, I will migrate to it. Yeah, there's someone else in the System Crafters community who was using VimWiki and was trying to migrate their stuff that they did there over to org room. I think it's on the wiki of the Emacs from Scratch repo. Let's see, EFS. It was Humhunj Kamyab, if I'm pronouncing that name right. The person who was writing that information. Let's see, org room setup. This is stuff that's related to org roam v1 though, so I'm not sure. VimWiki, yeah. So this may not be completely applicable to v2, but it is something you can look at if you want a VimWiki-like setup. Let's see. Nova says, I started color coding my notes. I color the real important stuff in red and sometimes add a bunch of exclamation points. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a way to help find things for yourself. Ravi says, I find Joplin pretty nice to take quick notes, but it's not node-based, I guess, although there is tag functionality. I've tried GitHub pages to render markdown content locally to build a ZK system. I haven't tried Joplin, but I've heard about it. Peter Minking says, anyone use Zotero? I have not used it, but I I think that it is mentioned actually in the How to Take Smart Notes book that I referenced before, particularly when gathering bibliographic references, like if you want to reference research papers or books, things like that. A. Cortez says, new Emacs has a built-in org site. Yeah, that's the video that I looked at before. Can I go back to that? Yeah, so I mentioned this stream last time. I think John Kitchen made a video basically talking about org site, the new functionality. Garzola says, I use orgraph to manage bibtext.
Right. I want to show you a little bit about what I've been...
Good. Sorry, I started hearing someone talk in my room, and it sounded very like close to me, so it scared the crap out of me. Links to PDF, insert bibtext from DOI, etc. James, I write all my papers like that. Also, Ivy bibtext for instant access. You know, I haven't really had... Whenever I was actually doing, like, looking at research papers and whatnot back in grad school, this stuff would have been great, but yeah, I haven't had to do that since then, so I haven't had to try out these tools. Mark says, I've been using Zotero a bit. I like it syncing. Near Transmission says, any thoughts on OrgQL? I've been wanting to use it, to try it out, but I have not had a chance yet. OrgQL, I think it's another Alpha Papa package. Yeah, it's Alpha Papa's package. I think this one is like, you use this along with something like Org Super Agenda to make more powerful agendas. So let's drop that here. Ina says, Lola, I thought the same thing as well. Yeah, it scared the crap out of me. I don't know, I think it's the way that he recorded the audio. It made it sound like it's in a room, so if you have headphones on, it's totally trippy. Martin says, I maybe will try to sync my org mode to Notion. You could do that. I don't know, Notion, like, I got excited about Notion when I first tried to use it, but then I realized how limited it was, especially on Android. It takes forever to open the app for that. So I just kind of like was like, OrgRome's ultimately better. Martin says, can highly recommend the Co-X3 community for Notion and productivity tips. Yeah, so anything that you find that might be a productivity tip for Notion probably would apply to org mode as well, because there's a lot of overlap, because in Notion you can do like tables of information and link between documents and things like that. So a lot of the same ideas could technically be applied in org mode as well. Trying to think of what other tools I've used. There was a period of time where I was using Workflowy and Dynalist, which is also very similar. I don't know if you've heard of those tools, Workflowy. So I had used Emacs in org mode before this, and this kind of seemed like an interesting way to organize information. However, it's extremely hierarchical and not exactly... I mean, you can link between nodes, but it really sort of encourages you to be hierarchical on everything. And if you try to organize information hierarchically, eventually you're going to realize how limiting that is, and it starts to make you itch. So I feel like the ZK approach and tools like OrgRome or any other tool that allows you to do this sort of networked wiki-like node linking is better. Much better than using hierarchy. However, it is kind of nice to be able to zoom in to the lower levels of hierarchy and like write notes for those levels. So it can be interesting, but you can implement the same kind of hierarchy with structure notes and other things like that in OrgRome and in Zettelkasten if you want to. But you know, maybe you've heard of this tool. They don't have like a demo here, so I can't show you. But anyway. Obviously, you can do the whole same thing with org mode as well, because you can do hierarchical notes to whatever level of depth you care about. Let's see here. Anybody yelling at me? Cool. Let's see. What else have I used over the years? Evernote. I've used Evernote for things, but I think Evernote is very like document focused and not so great for trying to make a more in-depth system like this. Martin says OrgQL is a better agenda view, I heard. Yeah, OrgQL allows you to query across your org items a lot more effectively. I think it gives you basically like a DSL of some sort, to like a query language basically to query over your org files. And then you can apply that to an agenda if you wanted to. Let's see. Neurotransmission says it could be used with agenda or timers and pre-written questions to prompt attention to review. Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Martin says I can send you information on how I use OrgBrain. Definitely, yeah. I would love to hear that. I imagine that they come from a similar thought process, OrgBrain and OrgRoam. So I would like to see how they map to each other. Peter says, tried Evernote 5 years ago, not a big fan. Yeah, I mean, at the time, it was pretty cool, but I think the thing that was cool about it was it made it so that you could sync notes between your computer and your phone and a website, so it's very effective for that, but, you know, new tools for that have risen since then. Let's see. Nova says, especially as I'm using my stylus to write my notes on my laptop. That's cool. Trying to think of what else would be interesting to talk about related to this. So I have not finished reading how to take smart notes yet. I'm going to try to read more of that to get more insights into it. And maybe later I'm going to do a video, like an actual real tutorial video on how you can set up OrgRoam to be a real Zettelkasten. And a lot of the discussion we've had today has been excellent for sort of seeding my own thoughts about that. So obviously I need to go and write a lot of this down after the stream is over. It's been really useful having Sasha and Christian here, who have written a lot of the posts on Zettelkasten.de, which is a great site if you want to see like more practical implementation across various programs that you might want to use for this approach. So I'll write that down one more time. I believe that's the right link for that. There's a lot of posts there. I think they also have a community for, they have an online forum, they have courses, etc., stuff like that. And I think they have their own streams as well about it, which is great. So I think you should check that out as well. This is the post that I mentioned earlier about OrgRoam. So I mean, I think this is a really interesting approach, and I'm trying to use it better because I personally think I could benefit from it a lot, because I want to, I make content every week, obviously. I'm making videos every week, but I want to write a book or multiple books even, write more actual articles on a website. I think it's going to be useful for all of that, and also for sort of building up my own overarching personal philosophy about all this, system crafting and free software, etc. So it's a great technique for that, I think. Garjola says something very important. Beware of shiny tools, proprietary formats, and cloud storage. Don't want to lose my second brain. If you're anything like me, you've probably tried a bunch of different tools over the years, and you've got notes that have been strewn about many different tools that aren't easy to extract the information from. So it's scary to think about not having access to your old thoughts because some service shuts down and you don't have access to that information anymore. So I would say if you've been using any tools like that in the past, try to find a way to export that information and work it into your system. I need to do that as well, or at least back it up somehow so that you don't lose it, because one day all these services are going to be gone and your information is going to be gone as well. Nova says, I use Zernal++ on my ThinkPad, got Manjaro running on it. Never heard of that one before. Martin says, just temporary fast notes on the go. Oh yeah, OneNote, definitely. David says, I use Evernote for everything, including sensitive information. When it got hacked, Evernote support was unresponsive, forced to shut down my account. Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, if someone else has your information and they get hacked, then you're sort of vulnerable, I would say. Lawrence says, I think it could be useful to try them out. Yeah, I agree. It's useful to try things out to see what kind of ideas you can gain, especially if you have a way to re-implement them somehow in your own system, like with org mode or whatever. It's useful to know what perspectives other people have on managing tasks and also managing personal information, just in case you're missing out on something that might be useful. However, don't fall into the trap of changing the way that you do things very frequently. Nova says, I used OneNote for a good while, then I switched to Linux and found myself not being able to get access to the program. Yeah, I think you can get access via the web now, but there was a long period of time where you could not access those files because you needed the actual Windows app. However, I think that it might work in Wine, even way back then. The sort of Wine is not an emulator or compatibility layer for Windows apps in Linux. I think you might be able to use it for that. Peter says, I know a professor in my department who will literally write a note on paper and just drop it on the ground somewhere in the house so he'll forget about it and run across it again later. Wow. Yeah, and this person is somehow married. Yeah, I don't think that would work very well for me. And I would probably just, throw it away in the end. Garzola says, plain text in free software keeps you safe. Yeah, plain text especially. Like, having plain text means you can check it into source control. It's very easy to read the format or use any kind of code to process the format. Plain text is great. Neurotransmission says you could use a CNC with clay tablets. If your on-site burns down, you have a fire-cured backup that will stand the test of time. If I ever come up with a set of ideas that are so good, I will do this, and I will come to the top of a mountain and hold them together and proclaim myself to be a prophet for all the land. No, I'm just kidding. That's a terrible thing to say. All right, I think that we've hit the 2-hour time for the stream today. I hope that the stream was working well for everybody on the other platforms. I kind of get the impression that it has been running, so hopefully it was interesting to you who watched it from Twitter or Twitch. If you like the fact that it was available on these other platforms, definitely let me know, because I'll keep doing it if people think that it's useful this way. And yeah, so next week, what I want to do is I'm going to continue the Orgrim series. I'm going to talk specifically about capture. And since we talked a lot about that today, I have some thoughts now about how I want to approach that. And I'll probably try to cast that in the light of this discussion, but talk specifically about how you can use the built-in functionality of Orgrim to capture ideas and anything else that you need to do. Because there's a few different ways that you can use capture with Orgrim. And maybe I'll try to do another one of those short videos this week as well, if I have time. That was a lot of fun. A lot of people liked the one that I did this week on the Pomodoro timer in Emacs. Once again, I had to throw a little bit of a clickbait title, but it's not too far from the truth. It's a timer that you can use to time box your work. So we'll see if I can get another one of those out. Let's see. Robbie says, can you share your thoughts on privacy functionality in context of selection of apps sometime? Yeah. That's a good topic. That may be a good stream topic one day, I think. Neurotransmission says, thanks for building a nice community. Well, thank you all for being a nice community, because I'm always very happy to see how nice people are, especially in the IRC and in the Discord and on the live streams, etc. Because there's a lot of hostility that can be found on the internet, and I prefer this to be a place where people can come and just enjoy their time talking about cool stuff and not have to worry about the darker side of the internet appearing. All right, folks, let's see. Before I go, I would like to thank my sponsors, and as usual, I have not updated the screen in forever. I'm so sorry for that, but I'm literally working right now to change the way that I do this so it's much easier for me to manage. I've probably said that 15 times already over the last 3 months, but these people, plus many others who are not visible currently, have decided to support the work that I'm doing, making videos about GNU Emacs, GNU Geeks, etc., and I'm very thankful to them for their support. If you're interested in supporting the channel in this way, definitely check out the link that I have in the description. Maybe I've updated it now to go to systemcrackers.cc/support-the-channel if it's there. Otherwise, there's links to GitHub sponsors and Patreon in the description. Also, LibrePay, as I mentioned before, that's on the System Crackers website if you wanted to find the link for that. And if you are not interested in supporting that way, the most important thing you can do is to always leave a like or a comment on the videos that I post, because it helps out with the YouTube algorithm. And even if you're not interested in a particular topic, watch the video anyway or let it play so that YouTube sees that people are interested in the topics. And aside from that, I just want to say once again, thank you all for being here. It's always great to have so many people on and chatting, because I get a lot out of it. I learn a lot of things, and hopefully you all do too. So we'll stream again next Friday, and until then, we'll have another video probably Monday or Tuesday, depends on how productive I am this weekend. So as always, thanks a lot for watching, and until next time, happy hacking. We'll see you.